Hi friends. We're gonna add another standard to work on in art. It's citing specific evidence to support your interpretation of the mood, message, or meaning in a work of art. So for your final photography project, which is still a few days away, so don't stress, you're going to be taking a picture that tells a story, and you're also going to be using a balanced composition. So we've got both of those. Later we'll talk about paying attention to detail in photography. It's a little different than drawing and painting, but it's still super duper important. For this video though, we are simply focusing on citing specific evidence to support your interpretation of the mood, message, or meaning in a work of art. First, I want to give you a little bit of a history of photography and then I'm going to show you a painting and a photograph as they relate to war, and we'll talk about the evidence that tells us how photography really changed the way civilians, or the public, people like you and me, not soldiers and generals, view war. So first, let's head over to the resource wall. When we did 1 Point Perspective, we were playing around with things that were discovered in like the 1400s to 1600s. We call it the Renaissance. This was happening all over the world. It was a big deal. And we know that artists were very preoccupied or obsessed with painting things, drawing things so that they looked real. Remember that quote? Art should be a window into another world. So we have a flat picture plane, and then we're creating an illusion in that plane so it looks like we can walk into it. So we had that idea. There's Baroque. All the way, still super realistic. And then we went into like straight up realism, right? But right somewhere between actually we could call it like, it's really the 1830s that things start to change, but you'll see we've got realism from 1840 to 1880, and then things get really bizarre in like 1870. We start seeing Impressionism. Artists are no longer preoccupied with making things look so real. In fact, if we continue, Expressionism does the same thing, Cubism does the same thing, Dada gets real weird. We just start going a whole different direction with art. So something happened here, somewhere between realism and Impressionism. And what happened was we started figuring out how to take pictures. So we talked a little bit in class about why we see. Light bounces off of objects and enters your eyes. And when we get into color theory, we'll talk more in depth about that. But a camera works the same way. There is light coming out of these lights, or the sun. It's bouncing off of the object, and then our eyes are collecting the reflected light. So now we have the ability to create images, right? Images that mirror reality almost exactly, right? We can frame them so that they get weird. This does some nutso things to art. Let's go over here. So here, in these notes, I have stuff written down for you, but you're going to have to add details from what I'm saying, okay? So first, let's go back to the objective, citing evidence to support your interpretation of the mood, message, or meaning. We need to talk about exactly what the mood, message, or meaning of an artwork is. Artwork is a way to communicate ideas, feelings, stories. And we do it in English. We do it with words. In our daily life, we do it with words when we talk to somebody. In art, we do it with imagery. So let's look at this one. This is the death of General Mercer at the Battle of Princeton, and it is a painting of war, that's obvious, but as you look at it, the word that I'm going to use to describe the mood or the meaning is romanticized. All right, we do have a general dying, but everybody looks pretty heroic. Look at this dude here. He's just kind of like hanging out watching with his heart over his chest, all patriotic, right? Does that happen in war? I'm not sure. But when we compare it to this one, this is another image of war. It's a photograph. The mood is very, very different. It's disturbing, is what it is. So that's the mood and message. We can get that generally just from looking at something. It's kind of like balance. You feel it. If you start thinking about it too much, you might get a little confused. But from looking at an image, you should be able to feel the mood, message, or meaning. And these two images have very, very different moods. So next, we need to cite evidence to support our interpretation of the mood, message, or meaning. This is similar to citing our evidence to support craftsmanship or attention to detail on our work. We are just trying to prove something different. So when we're talking about craftsmanship, you cite evidence, things that you can physically point to support the fact that you paid attention to detail. And when we're interpreting the mood, message, or meaning of a work of art, we are citing evidence to support my opinion or idea that this is a romanticized version of war. So this is when you need to start adding notes. These are the two photographs we're looking at, or images. So first we're going to look at John Trimble, the death of General Mercer at the Battle of Princeton. And my interpretation of it is that it is, and that's supposed to be a name, romanticized. I don't think I spelled that right. Or heroic. All right? So I need to find evidence of that. Here's my evidence. Okay. So, evidence number one, that this is a romanticized. By romanticized, I mean like we're remembering what war is and we're taking all of the good stuff and we're leaving all of the bad stuff out. I'm sure you guys have memories like that. So I'm pretty sure that this is the general. I'm assuming this because he is the focal point of the painting. That's where my eyes go. Also, it looks like he's the guy that they're trying to kill. They've already stabbed his horse. There's a tiny, tiny bit of blood there. But let's talk about why this is heroic. We've got flags. We have an American, that looks like an American flag there, an American flag here. We've got some sort of a European or British flag over here. We have a guy leaning on his sword with his hand over his heart. Very patriotic. We have another, this looks like another general. He's in blue. On his horse with a sword, like, let's go forward, keep moving. We've got, look at the way this guy is dying, man. He's all stretched out. It's very dramatic, right? We've got all of this smoke here. This guy on the drum is also looking over here, and it's not very grotesque, I guess. Also, General Mercer looks very serious. It's right before his death, so judging by the title, he died. But it's right before his death, so it's recording, romanticizing, and celebrating his sacrifice of life. Now, let's move towards Timothy O'Sullivan's A Harvest of Death. This was taken during the Civil War in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which is about 45 minutes from where I grew up. Fun fact. And it's much different. So this picture was taken right around the time when photography was becoming more available or more used, not like it is today. And it really is the first image, or one of the first images that we got straight from war. It's no longer an artist working in his studio, romanticizing or thinking about how heroic our soldiers are. It's stark, right? It's real. And immediately, so let's say the details here. It's sobering. It really knocks you over the head and communicates what war is really like. My evidence is all of the dead people lying here. For scale, so we can see exactly how big this field is and how far those bodies stretch. We have some shadowy figures over here, a guy on a horse and a guy that looks like he's beside a cart. And if we look even closer, so we can see how serious this image really is, you see all of these objects all over the floor, or the ground rather, it's outside, all over the ground. What's happening here is the people who survived this battle at Gettysburg, they're pulling everything out of the pockets of these bodies, and they're taking the valuables with them. It dehumanizes things a little bit. It really communicates the cost of war. This photograph, while it wasn't like, we didn't have printed material or the ability to print images in mass yet, it was displayed all over the country, and it got people really worked up, and they really thought about the cost of war, the cost of human life. Yup. Pretty nuts, huh? All right, so let's talk about some main points. So here's our history. Photography was a product of science. It was seen as a very useful tool for determining what was real. Artists were like, this is awesome. Now we have a flat image of life on a flat surface that we can copy. But they also, that's our tool, right? They also kind of feared it because they were afraid it would replace skilled painters who dedicated their life to visual truth. So it was a little threatening, but overall, photography challenged pictorial representation or realistic art, and photographers looked to painters to learn to go beyond simple reproduction of reality or representation. And I think if we look back at this picture, this is more than just simple reproduction. It really does communicate an idea. And the idea is that the cost of war is really, really high and sad, and it gives us a lot to think about, especially when you compare it to this romanticized and heroic, can't speak, image of the death of General Mercer. Okay? So remember, our objective is to cite specific evidence to support our interpretation of the mood, message, or meaning in a work of art. So tomorrow, I'm going to ask you guys to take some more photographs, and you are going to be aiming to create a mood, a message, or a meaning. We could also say, tell a story, right? A general mood, happy, sad, depressed, excited, nervous, or a whole story. And in order to succeed, you're going to need to think about what evidence you are going to include in your photograph to get your viewers to totally understand the mood or story that you're trying to communicate. All right? I'll see you tomorrow. Super duper excited. There's one more video for this unit on feedback, and I'll let you know when that's up and ready to go.